Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this installment of The List Doctor. This is a series in which I look at and explore a whole array of different list concepts in the world of 40k and do some sort of focused sessions looking at particular list concepts that people have sent in to try and get the best out of their particular build on the tabletop. I am your host, Tom, very lowest of men. I haven't had much time for this series recently because I've been very busy with work, but now things are calming down, so I'm really excited to get stuck in and start making this content more regularly. Today, we've got an extremely fun list, which is Gareth's Iyanden Wraith Host. And Gareth has sent me some beautiful photos of this army. It's very conceptual, very beautifully and lovingly assembled. I'm really excited to get thinking about how we can get the most out of it on the tabletop. So, the goals. What we're trying to do here in these sort of sessions is develop an interesting list concept. I'm looking for interesting, I'm looking for flavorful, but I'm also then looking to think about how we can help it to achieve its best potential. I want to have fun whilst doing this, and I'm also very keen to make minimal changes to the overall concept. Okay, I don't want to completely throw everything out. I don't want to just rush in every single optimal unit for an army. I want to work with what we've got, but add some flavor and add some play to it to get it functioning. Please do be nice in the comments to our guests. These are people sending in lists and armies that they're really proud of and that they love. We all know what the most optimal options are. We can all go on Goonhammer. We can all go and read about particular units. There's no need to be sort of too showy in the comments. Try to engage with what we're trying to do here and what our particular guests' lists are looking to be. So let's start by just thinking about what Iyanden gives you in general. Okay, Iyanden are obviously one of the doomed craft worlds. They've lost almost all of their actual physical elf bodies. The vast majority of the craft world are now taking the form of wraiths. They're having to rely very heavily on resurrected spirit stones and elves in order to deal with the massive damage they've suffered at the hands of the Tyranids. In the game, this means that Iyanden are a very wraith-centric army with a number of traits and buffs to help you get the most out of wraiths. Wraiths are definitely not the most sort of powered or pushed units in the Eldari book at this moment in time, which makes this a really interesting challenge and means you need to work out how to squeeze the absolute maximum out of Wraith units and get them to do what you want. So the Iyanden trait reduces AP 1 and 2 by 1, and also gives you +1 to combat attrition test. Now, the second part of that isn't that big a deal, but it does help your Wraith units stick around if they take casualties. But the AP reduction is very nice and very useful. It can combo with defensive buffs to produce Wraith units that can take a lot of small arms shooting without falling over. And I think there's definitely something there, especially when comboed with Wraith Blades and Wraith Lords. Iyanden also gives you access to a stratagem called Guided Wraith Sight. Now, this allows you to take a Spirit Seer that you have on the board and broadcast the reroll 1s to wound that they give to a Wraith unit. So this helps to give Wraith units around the board rerolls and can help them to achieve additional damage. It also means that if you have a Spirit Seer, they don't have to be on the front line. I'll come back to that a little bit later. Finally, Iyanden get a very interesting relic in the Citronome of Iyanden. This is a flexible relic. You can use it in a range of different ways. I didn't really appreciate quite how nifty this thing was until I re-examined it. But essentially, the bearer can select a nearby Wraith unit to give it +1 attack and battle focus. Flexible combat and shooting options here, and I'll talk a little bit about how to maximize the Citronome further on. So the list that Gareth has sent me is as follows. He has 2 HQs. He has a Farseer with Guide and Doom. He has a Spirit Seer with Protect and Jinx carrying the Citronome. He then has 10 Guardians as his troops. And then in the elite section, he has a lot of Wraith. So here we go. We've got 3x5 Wraith Blades, 1 unit of 5 Wraith Guard with cannons. The Wraith Blades all have shields and axes for durability. And then 2 Wraith Lords with Bright Lances and Glaives. In the heavy support, he's got another big Wraith unit with a Wraith Seer, who's carrying the Protect Jinx power and also a D cannon. And finally, he also has 2 transports in the form of Wave Serpents, who are currently kitted out with Bright Lances and Crystal Targeting Matrices. So, as things stand, this list has a number of strengths. It's very durable. That's its biggest strength, right? Wraiths have -1 damage, which once you couple it with the Eandon trait, makes them surprisingly difficult to hurt and to shift. It also has damage potential in multiple phases. It has some good shooting, particularly heavy shooting. It has some good combat, and it has some psykers in there who can slap mortal wounds on via their psychic potential as well. It doesn't give up secondaries to the opponent. There aren't a number of very obvious kill secondaries to take here against this list, which can be difficult for an opponent looking to find an easy third secondary. And because it has psykers, it's not easy for the opponent to exploit psychic secondaries either. So there are definitely some positives before we start to think about how to improve the capabilities of the list on the board. In terms of vulnerabilities at the moment, the primary issues this list is going to have are reliably scoring secondaries, playing the primary as effectively as it possibly can, because unusually for an Eldar list, this is definitely a list that wants to bully the primary a little bit and try to shut the opponent's scoring down, but also tie up the objectives. And I think for an army that has as many combat units as this one does in the form of Wraith Blades and Wraith Lords, it probably wants some fight phase control to help it get the most of the melee phase if it gets into close quarters with the enemy. So those are the things I'm going to be looking to fine tune and improve on today. Let's start with the secondary scoring. In terms of minor adjustments you can make here to improve the secondary scoring, I think for Eldar, psychic secondaries and action secondaries are really important to be able to unlock. In this list, you can adjust and tweak a few things to make that happen. You can either give the Farseer the Falchiu's Wing Relic, which enables him to fly, or you could upgrade him to a Skyrunner to give him a Jet Bite. Then you've got a much more mobile Psyker, which immediately makes scoring psychic secondaries easier. You could take an additional Warlock Skyrunner, which gives you another fast biker character, and we'll come back to some of the things you can do with that later on, and gives you another caster for Protect Jinx, because what I think this list probably wants to do is keep its Spirit Seer, because he's on foot, keep him back, and give him Quicken and Restrain. Now, in combination with those other characters, what that means is that a biker character can run out to an objective or to the center or to get line of sight on an enemy character in order to achieve a psychic secondary before the Spirit Seer then uses Quicken or Restrain to get them back out of harm's way. Because the Spirit Seer is a long way back, it should be possible for him to be out of deny range, which means that your characters can go in, use the Fate dice to get a high cast on the action, and then get out of dodge as well. In terms of secondary scoring, I think the one sort of little utility unit that's really valuable for Eldar right now that this list could do with is Dire Avengers. And the primary reason for that is that Dire Avengers are very cheap, they're very cost effective, and they can action and shoot. So 2 squads of 6 or even 3 squads of 6 isn't going to set you back very many points and gives you the option to put them in strategic reserves and bring them in on board edges to both be shooting the opponent with a wave of shuriken shots, and Dire Avengers have very nice shuriken output, but also ticking off an action secondary like RBD. You can tick off the different quarters as you go. And because they're 6-man squads, they'll pass that automatically. You don't have to worry about that failing. So I think those changes would enable better psychic and action secondary scoring. Obviously, with these tweaks, you're going to need to find some points to pay for them. And I think in this list, probably you could drop one of the Wave Serpents, potentially the Guardians if you're taking Dire Avengers, because those give you plenty of shuriken shots as well, but not essential. And I think on the Wave Serpents themselves, because they're transports, they're often going to be running around, they might be advancing, they might be hiding behind cover to get things to their destination. The heavy guns on those are probably less essential than the heavy guns elsewhere. So you might be able to save some points by taking the Bright Lances off and giving them shuriken cannons or scatter lasers, and probably dropping the targeting matrix as well. So that's the place I would start in terms of freeing up some points to pay for some of these additional tricks and tools. In terms of primary scoring, I think this list already has a lot of really useful tools for scoring the primary, but you need to amp these up and absolutely maximize their ability to do so. Big bricks of Wraith Blades are extremely hard to shift, and so you want to make sure that them being on an objective is very important. And the best way to do this is to both make them even more durable, but also to give them OBSEC. For this reason, and I'll explain some of the other reasons later, I think you don't need Guide and Doom in this list. I think instead you could take Will of Asuryan and Fortune on your Farseer. Will of Asuryan will enable a Wraith Blades unit to access OBSEC, or indeed a Wraith Lord. You can put it on a core unit. Likewise, Fortune is going to give a unit a 5-up Feel No Pain. Once you combo a 5-up Feel No Pain with Protect, with the Eandon buff to AP, with the -1 damage of the race, you're going to start getting big bricks of Wraith Blades that are extremely hard to kill. And if you've put OBSEC on them, that means that their presence on an objective is much harder for the opponent to play around. I know if I saw big bricks of Wraiths on an objective, one of the things I would probably do is throw little bits of OBSEC on there to stop them from scoring the primary. But if you've got OBSEC on the points, that is going to make it much harder for the opponent to do so. With exactly that same goal in mind, I would also be very tempted, if you do take one of the biker characters, as I've suggested, to give them the relic Sunstorm. Now, this gives them a massive 22-inch move, but it also makes them OBSEC. And obviously, in the current scoring system for 40k, what that means is if one of those biker characters is also on an objective where you've got a big bunch of Wraithblades, that means effectively you've got OBSEC on the point, and you can use a big brick of Wraithblades to control it. For exactly this reason, I'd be tempted to combine 2 of your 5-mans into a 10, and I would, in the long term, be tempted to think about trying to run 2x10 Wraithblades as well. So you could have 2 points, which you're holding with a whole bunch of stuff, OBSEC cast on one of them, OBSEC from Sunstorm from another, to really help you boss the primary in a very un-Eldar kind of way, which I love. So I think those kinds of changes would make this sort of melee brawling approach that the Wraithblades lean towards much better and give it present much more of a problem for the opponent in terms of primary scoring. In terms of fight phase control, I really think a combat list like this wants a fight last somewhere. And you've got a couple of choices for that. You could take an Autarch with wings and a Banshee mask. He's going to be quick, he's relatively cheap, and he can give out fight last. He also gives reroll ones to hit. So this is one of the ways that you could mitigate not using guide in this list, because you've got the Autarch's rerolls instead, as long as he's accompanying the core units. Because the Spirit Seer probably wants to hang back to use Quicken, you could also move the Citronome Relic over to the Autarch, right? Because he's likely to be in the thick of it in the fight, so he can give out that +1 attack, but he could also potentially give Battle Focus to a Wraith unit, which we'll talk about later on. A great Warlord trait for an Autarch that's doing this job is Ambush of Blades to give a core unit additional AP in melee, which would help make your Wraiths even more killy in the fight. A fun flex pick you could use here is Jain Zar, for quite similar reasons, right? Jain Zar would give you a fight last. She's a Phoenix Lord, which means she can only take 3 wounds in a phase, so she's very annoying to kill. She has OBSEC, which again combos well with the primary mission play that you're looking to undertake here, and she can also potentially get back up on a 4-up, so she's very annoying to remove. I think a Phoenix Lord in this list goes a long way to adding an additional puzzle for the opponent to solve, and because Jain Zar brings fight last, and this is quite a melee-centric list, I think she might be one of the options I would really like to utilize. You could look at Baharoth, and one of the options you could go with this is to think about getting quicker units in for behind enemy lines, but I felt like that wasn't in keeping with the overall theme of the Iyanden here, which is a much more grindy, melee-centric list. In terms of utilizing Iyanden effectively, I think there's a number of tools in the list and in the sub-faction that you can exploit in order to make your units efficient. By using rerolls from an Autarch and guided Wraith Sight, you can make sure that you've got rerolls to hit and to wound in different places on the board, which helps make your shooting more efficient and your combat more efficient. You can also use the guided Wraith Sight to project that into place on the board where you don't have rerolls. So I think that's very flexible and actually in some ways more reliable than Guide or Doom at the moment, because those powers can fail, they can get denied, and you've often got to use your Strands of Fate dice for casts for more important things, like psychic secondaries. The Citronome Relic, I think, is awesome, because either you're going to make one of those big bricks of Wraithblades really killy with additional attacks, or if you combo it with a Wraith Lord or a Wraith Guard squad and use Battle Focus, you can have one of your shooting units just sticking a tiny gun out from behind a ruin, firing at something, and then using its Battle Focus move to get out of harm's way, which is going to help those Wraith Lords stay alive longer. Likewise, the Wraith Guard, although that brick is probably harder to get the most out of Battle Focus with. So I think that's a really nice relic, and you have to start seeing it both in terms of a combat boost, but also a potential shooting tool as well. I think to use the list effectively, you're going to want to slap every defensive buff under the sun on a 10-man brick of Wraithblades and then push that aggressively onto the mission primary to go and choke up the middle of the board, choke up primary, threaten to score 12s on primary, threaten to get across to your opponent's lines and shut down their primary, and force the opponent to commit onto that brick in order to stop it from doing this. That then lets you counterattack with the rest of the guns and combat in the list. And if you have units like Dire Avengers coming in off the side, it makes them more vulnerable to you getting good angles and lines of shooting on them as well. So you really want to use your powerful buffs, slap all of them on a big, powerful, durable squad, and push it aggressively forward. Finally, you've got a lot of sort of low volume but very high quality shots in the Bright Lances and the D cannons. And I think this is where Strands of Fate come in, because you can use your hits and wounds to make that shooting extremely effective and efficient to take out enemy vehicles and hard targets. I'm going to end with some fun suggestions. I think those are the main things I think you can do to tighten up your play with the Iyanden. But I also think this is definitely an army where you could have a lot of fun using a Wraith Knight. Very big, very durable, creates another large challenge. You can have it with a shield for a 4-up invuln, again pushing that forward alongside the Wraith Blaze to saturate threats. But it's also a nice situation for the Avatar, because you could make the Avatar OBSEC, you can make him have a 5-up Feel No Pain using the different buff powers, and the Avatar can sometimes stick out where, again, his durability creates a massive problem for the enemy as well. And obviously that's a unit that if the opponent does come in to fight you, is always going to be able to swing on death via a stratagem to put a big dent in the opponent. So those are sort of fun flex things that I think with the right sort of conversions and themes. And as I say, Gareth, I highly encourage you to keep that lovely converted theme going on all of these additional changes and units to sort of keep the theme baked in. But those would be fun things that I think would be hugely thematic to try out at some point in this army as well. Thank you very much to everyone for watching, and thank you for Gareth for sending these beautiful photos and this wonderful, interesting list in for me to have a look at and have a tinker with. I really appreciate it, and it's been loads of fun to sit down and think about. If you're interested in me having a run over a concept you've got, you can send it to lowestofmen@gmail.com. This is one of my sort of pet projects. I don't have tons of time for this at the moment, but I will try to get to things eventually. And I'm very interested in particular in interesting and thematic concepts, often at the start of working an army out, that I can look at and start to sort of optimize and tweak around in terms of the theme that you're looking to do. I'm not especially interested in top tier competitive lists. I think, there's plenty of information you can access out there to make the really obvious builds work. But if you've got something that you feel is interesting and original, or you've got something you're just starting out on and you'd like some advice or to show off some lovely photos of the army, as Gareth has done here, please do send lists and photos to that email address. Finally, you can find plenty more 6++ content over on our YouTube at 6++ Gaming with the link down below. Thank you very much for watching. Give Gareth some love on this beautiful, beautiful army in the comments, and I'll see you all again next time.